Three dangerous men disappeared from a maximum security prison, leaving behind no trace, no tunnels, no overpowered guards, just gone. For 6 months, they plotted their escape, planning every detail from inside one of the country's most secure facilities. And the mastermind behind it all? An Iranian-American named Hossein Nayeri, a man so dangerous, so manipulative, that he could twist anyone's will to his own. But this wasn't just any prison break. This was a meticulously crafted plan, executed with bedsheets, hacksaws, and a single cell phone. But as plans go, this one quickly turned from careful calculation to a desperate struggle for survival. This is a story filled with shocking twists and unexpected turns. Orange County Men's Jail in 2016 was not the kind of place anyone expects to disappear from. It was a fortress, 5 stories tall, designed to hold the worst of the worst. More than 60 inmates were crammed together in massive dormitories, always under the watchful eyes of guards patrolling the catwalks. No privacy, nowhere to hide. For most people here, there was no way out. But for Hossein Nayeri, this wasn't just another stop before his life sentence. This was an opportunity, one last shot at freedom. Hossein Nayeri's story starts long before his days inside Orange County Jail. Born to Persian immigrants, he grew up in Fresno. Charismatic, intelligent, but with a knack for bending the rules. Authority? He wasn't interested. After a brief stint in the Marines that ended in a discharge, his life spiraled out of control. By 2012, his crimes had become as shocking as they were brutal. He was accused of kidnapping a marijuana dispensary owner, torturing him in the desert, and mutilating him in ways that would haunt anyone. Conviction meant he'd never see the outside again. But Nayeri wasn't about to go down without a fight. He fled the country, vanishing into Iran, where American authorities couldn't touch him. For 2 years, he remained hidden. But eventually, law enforcement lured him back to the U.S., using his ex-wife as bait. Nayeri was caught, brought back to face trial, and thrown into the maximum security Orange County Men's Jail. For most, that would have been the end of the line. But for Nayeri, this was just the beginning. He knew his best shot wasn't a trial. It was escaping before he ever got there. The jail was built to hold people like him, violent offenders who had nothing to lose. And while it was a fortress, every fortress has a weakness. From the moment he was placed in Model F, Nayeri's mind went to work. He started looking for a way out. Inside the jail, Nayeri was just another face among dozens of inmates packed together in a dormitory-style holding cell. Escaping from a place like this seemed impossible. Every move was visible, every sound echoed through the halls. But Nayeri saw something others didn't. Behind one of the bunks was a ventilation grate. To most people, it was just a piece of metal. To Nayeri, it was a potential escape route. The grate wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a challenge. It was sealed, and even if he could break through, the vent might lead nowhere. But Nayeri was willing to take that risk. He just needed a way to cut through it. Nayeri knew he couldn't do this alone. He was smart enough to know he needed help. He found it in 2 other inmates, Bak Duong, a seasoned gang member known as a fixer, and Jonathan Tu, a younger man caught up in a Vietnamese gang. Together, they formed a plan. Nayeri convinced Bak to use his street connections to get a hacksaw smuggled into the jail. It wasn't going to be easy, but Bak had a network on the outside, people who could get things done. Piece by piece, their escape plan began to take shape. Even though in a place like Orange County Jail, trust was a dangerous thing. Somehow, Bak managed to pull it off. The hacksaw was smuggled in, hidden from the eyes of the guards. For the first time, Nayeri's plan wasn't just an idea, it was real. And now they had to move fast. After the guards had done their rounds each night, Nayeri, Bak, and Jonathan would go to work. For weeks, they sawed through the bed frame blocking the vent. They had to work in complete silence, hiding their tools and their progress from both the guards and the other inmates. One wrong move, one sound too loud, and it would all be over. The tension inside the jail was rising. Nayeri's trial was getting closer, and the window for their escape was shrinking. Finally, after 16 long days, they broke through the bed frame. They now had direct access to the vent, but the hardest part was still ahead. The vent system was a maze, a dark, narrow passage winding through the jail's infrastructure. They had no idea where it would lead, or if it would lead them to freedom, but they didn't have a choice. With the bed frame out of the way, they spent another 8 days cutting through the grate itself. Each night was a test of nerves as guards patrolled the halls, completely unaware that an escape plan was unfolding right under their noses. Finally, the grate came loose. They were in. But crawling through the vent was only the first step. They now had to figure out how to navigate the labyrinth of air ducts, pipes, and shafts that ran through the jail. They had no maps, no way of knowing which direction would lead them out. They had to explore blindly, feeling their way through the dark, hoping they wouldn't end up trapped deeper inside the walls. Nayeri knew time wasn't on his side. With his trial inching closer every day, any slip-up could mean the end of the line. But inside the maze of pipes and ventilation ducts, he realized he had a bigger problem. There was no way to navigate these narrow, dark spaces without light. They needed a cell phone. In the world outside, a cell phone might seem trivial. Inside Orange County Jail, it was everything. A flashlight, a way to communicate, even a means to film their escape. Nayeri knew what had to happen next. They had to get their hands on a phone. Once again, he turned to Back, the fixer. If Back could get a hacksaw smuggled in, surely he could smuggle in a phone too. Contraband wasn't uncommon in jail, and if anyone could pull it off, it was Back. He had the right connections, the kind that could get you anything for the right price. Just like before, Back delivered. When they finally had the phone, the first thing they did was turn on the flashlight. The darkness that had been suffocating them was now pierced by the soft glow of the phone screen. Suddenly, the maze didn't seem so impossible. They could see where the ducts led, what obstacles stood in their way, and most importantly, how to navigate around them. For Nayeri, having the phone wasn't just about finding a way out. Nayeri's narcissism wouldn't allow him to miss this opportunity to document their daring escape. To him, this wasn't just a prison break, it was a spectacle. As they crawled through the narrow passages, they started recording every step. They thought they were invincible, confident that their daring escape would become a story for the ages. But the reality was far from what they imagined. The ventilation system was a maze of twisting pipes and narrow shafts. One wrong turn could send them back where they started. They moved carefully, one step at a time, navigating sharp corners and steep drops with precision. After weeks of inching their way through the system, they found it. The path to freedom. But there was a problem. The exit they had found wasn't at ground level. It was 12 feet above them and covered by wrought iron bars. They had come so far, but sawing through these bars could take months, and they didn't have that kind of time. If they spent too long on this part of the plan, they risked everything. Nayeri knew they couldn't afford to waste time. They needed to act fast. But in order to know for certain if this exit was right, they needed more information. A map wouldn't cut it. What they needed was satellite imagery, something that could show them the layout of the jail roof and the surrounding neighborhood. But there was no Wi-Fi in jail, no access to Google Maps. Nayeri wasn't the type to give up easily. He had a new plan. He started paying close attention to the staff, looking for someone he could manipulate. That's when he spotted Nushafaran Ravagi, an ESL from where they intended to be, but they were free. Back at the Orange County Jail, their escape went unnoticed at first. They had a man on the inside, someone who covered for them during the routine bed check, but it was only a matter of time before their absence would be discovered. 15 hours later, during the evening head count, the truth came to light. Nayeri, Tew, and Duong were gone. The Orange County Sheriff's Department erupted into chaos. Every available officer was mobilized. 250 deputies were assigned to the Jailbreak task force. The media was alerted, and soon news of the dangerous trio on the loose spread across the country. A massive manhunt was underway, and the entire nation was watching. While law enforcement scrambled, the escapes hid out in a seedy motel in San Jose, trying to lay low. Instead, they found themselves caught up in the media frenzy, their faces plastered across every news outlet. They watched the coverage on TV, reveling in the chaos they had unleashed. However, the euphoria didn't last. The longer they stayed put, the more Nayeri realized how dangerous their situation had become. They needed to move fast. The problem? They were running out of cash and options. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Bac Duong, ever the resourceful fixer, turned to Craigslist. He found a white van listed for sale. They arranged to meet the owner for a test drive, and true to their criminal instincts, they never returned it. Now they had a new vehicle, but Nayeri had one last loose end to tie up: Long Ma. He had been a witness to everything, and Nayeri knew witnesses were a liability. His decision was cold and calculated. Long Ma had to die. Bak, however, wasn't ready to take it that far. Over the course of their time together, he had developed a bond with Long Ma. The cab driver reminded him of an old uncle, and killing him was a line Bak wasn't willing to cross. Tensions between Bak and Nayeri boiled over. The two men came to blows, and though Nayeri had the upper hand, stronger, younger, and more fit, Bak's determination kept him standing. In the end, Nayeri relented. Bak may have lost the fight physically, but he won the moral battle. Long Ma's life was spared, at least for now. The next morning, Nayeri and Tu left the motel to get the windows on the van tinted. Bak seized the moment to approach Long Ma. "Uncle," he said, "we need to leave. They want to kill you. We need to go now." Long Ma, terrified, nodded. They managed to escape and make their way back to Orange County, but Bak wasn't escaping anymore. He was done. He made the decision to turn himself in. When Nayeri and Tu returned to the motel, they found Bak gone. Their time was running out. With no plan, no money, and no allies left, they packed up their belongings and hit the road once more, driving west. But now the game had changed. Low on resources and running out of places to hide, the two men found themselves not just fugitives from the law, but prisoners in their own escape plan. Meanwhile, law enforcement was still scrambling, chasing leads that led nowhere. Hossein Nayeri, Jonathan Tu, and Bak Duong had vanished into the night. Despite the media attention, the nationwide manhunt, and hundreds of officers on high alert, they seemed to have disappeared without a trace. But every escape has a weakness, and this one was no different. Out of nowhere, the break law enforcement had been praying for came from the most unlikely source: a tip. Bak Duong and the kidnapped cab driver, Long Ma, had returned to Orange County in plain sight. When they stopped at a local hardware store, Bak made a move no one could have predicted. He walked in and calmly told the employees to call the police. It was a bold move. Bak and Long Ma weren't just turning themselves in, they had come up with a plan to try and claim the reward money offered for information on the escape. Bak Duong had now become the first person in history to attempt to collect a reward for turning himself in. More than that, he had given up everything: the location of the van, the whereabouts of Nayeri and Tu. For Nayeri, the writing was on the wall. The moment Bak escaped with Long Ma, they knew it was only a matter of time before their entire operation unraveled. Somewhere in a stolen white van in the Park District of San Francisco, Nayeri and Tu felt the walls closing in. Nayeri may have been brilliant, but even he couldn't outrun fate forever. Their luck ran out in the most unexpected way. A homeless man recognized the van parked near a Whole Foods market. He had seen the news, seen their faces, and more importantly, he had seen that van. It was a moment of recognition that would bring Nayeri's escape to a crushing end. Within minutes, officers swarmed the van. Jonathan Tu, defeated and cornered, surrendered without a fight. But Nayeri, one last time, he ran. He wasn't going to escape to Iran. He wasn't going to escape his past. He wasn't even going to escape a parking lot. He sprinted away with desperation, but his freedom lasted only seconds. Police tackled him to the ground, and in that moment, it was over. His grand plan had collapsed, and now all that remained was the inevitable return to his cell. Nayeri, Tu, and Duong were taken back into custody. Their brief taste of freedom extinguished as quickly as it had started, but the consequences of their escape echoed far beyond their capture. The Orange County Jail was now under intense scrutiny. The then sheriff came under fire, accused of allowing outdated procedures to leave the jail vulnerable. The public demanded answers. How had this happened? Changes came swiftly. Motion detection cameras were installed in the utility corridors where Nayeri and his crew had made their move. Radio-tracked prisoner badges became the new norm, ensuring that every inmate's location was accounted for. The jail even brought in cell phone sniffing dogs to prevent the kind of communication that had allowed Nayeri's crew to organize their escape. As for the escapes, the fallout was severe. Bak Duong was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his role in the jailbreak. Jonathan Tu, the younger accomplice, now awaited his own fate in court. But for Hossein Nayeri, the mastermind behind it all, the trial would be little more than a formality. He had already been convicted for his brutal crimes and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. This was the end of the line for Nayeri. No more schemes, no more escapes. Unless he somehow pulled off another impossible prison break, he would never see the outside world again. For now, the doors of the Orange County Jail had slammed shut, and this time, they weren't opening.